Sometimes life changes in the blink of an eye. Sometimes a single moment can reveal the true character of a person and set in motion events that nobody could have predicted. This is the story of Maria Santos, a woman who worked 16-hour days for barely enough money to survive, and Marcus Wellington, a man whose wealth could buy entire cities. What happened when their worlds collided on one cold December night would shock everyone who thought they knew what kind of man Marcus really was. The image that would haunt him forever was simple yet heartbreaking. A woman sleeping on a cold marble floor, cradling a baby in her arms, choosing the child's warmth over her own comfort. But this story isn't just about wealth and poverty. It's about the unexpected ways that love, sacrifice, and human dignity can transform even the most hardened hearts. It's about how one act of pure selflessness can change not just two lives, but an entire community. What Marcus discovered that night would force him to question everything he believed about success, family, and what it truly means to be rich. And what Maria would learn about trust, hope, and second chances would prove that miracles can happen in the most unlikely places. This is their story, a story that began with a billionaire's late-night walk through his own mansion and ended with a discovery that would make headlines around the world. Maria Santos pressed her face against the cold bus window as the vehicle rumbled through the wealthy neighborhood of Beacon Hill. At 28 years old, she had already lived through more hardships than most people experience in a lifetime. The reflection staring back at her showed tired brown eyes, calloused hands, and the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. The bus stopped at the golden gates of the Wellington estate, and Maria gathered her worn canvas bag. Inside were her work clothes, a small photo of her deceased mother, and exactly $12. All the money she had left in the world. Tomorrow was her first day working as a live-in maid for Marcus Wellington, one of the richest men in America. Maria had heard the stories about Marcus Wellington. Newspapers called him brilliant, but ruthless. Business magazines praised his ability to turn failing companies into gold mines. But they also whispered about his cold treatment of employees. At 35, he had built a technology empire worth over $8 billion. But everyone said he had no heart. As Maria walked up the long driveway, she couldn't help but stare at the mansion ahead of her. It was bigger than her entire neighborhood back in El Salvador. The house had 47 rooms, 12 bathrooms, and a garage that could fit 20 cars. The monthly electricity bill for this place probably cost more than she had ever earned in a year. But Maria wasn't here to admire the wealth. She was here because she was desperate. 3 months ago, her life had been completely different. Maria had been working as a nurse in a small clinic in Boston, barely making ends meet, but proud of her work helping people. She shared a tiny apartment with her best friend Carmen, and sent most of her paycheck back home to support her younger brother's education in El Salvador. Then, everything fell apart in a single week. First, the clinic where she worked suddenly closed down when the owner was arrested for insurance fraud. Maria lost her job with no warning and no severance pay. Then, her landlord increased the rent by $400 a month, forcing her to move out of her apartment. Finally, her brother Carlos called from El Salvador with devastating news. Their father had suffered a heart attack and needed expensive surgery that the family couldn't afford. With no job, no home, and a family crisis on her hands, Maria had spent weeks searching for work. But her nursing license had expired, and she couldn't afford the fees to renew it. Decent jobs were hard to find, especially for someone without perfect English and no references from wealthy employers. That's when she saw the advertisement in the classified section of a Spanish-language newspaper. Live-in domestic worker needed. Private family. Room and board provided. Serious inquiries only. The pay was low, but it included free housing and meals. Most importantly, it was immediate. Maria had called the number and spoken with Mrs. Richardson, Marcus Wellington's household manager. The older woman's voice was stern but not unkind. She explained that Mr. Wellington traveled frequently and needed someone reliable to maintain his home. The hours would be long, the work would be hard, and Mr. Wellington valued privacy above everything else. He doesn't like noise, he doesn't like distractions, and he definitely doesn't like personal questions, Mrs. Richardson had warned. Can you handle that? Maria had assured her that she could. She needed this job too much to worry about a difficult employer. Now, standing in front of the massive wooden doors of the Wellington mansion, Maria took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house like church bells. Mrs. Richardson answered the door, a tall, thin woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a navy blue dress that looked like a uniform, and her expression was all business. "You must be Maria Santos," she said, looking her up and down with sharp blue eyes. "I'm Mrs. Richardson. Come in and wipe your feet." Maria followed the older woman into a foyer that was larger than most people's living rooms. The ceiling stretched up 2 stories, decorated with a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than a house. The floors were polished marble, so shiny that Maria could see her reflection in them. "Let me be very clear about the rules," Mrs. Richardson said as she led Maria through the house. "Mr. Wellington works from home most days, but he's often in meetings or on conference calls. You are not to interrupt him unless there's an emergency. You will clean the house, prepare simple meals when requested, and handle laundry and other household tasks. Your room is in the staff quarters on the 3rd floor." They climbed 2 flights of stairs, passing oil paintings that looked like they belonged in museums and furniture that seemed too expensive to actually sit on. Maria tried to memorize the layout of the house as they walked. Left from the main stairs led to Mr. Wellington's home office and private library. Right led to the formal living rooms and dining area. The kitchen was on the 1st floor toward the back of the house. "This will be your room," Mrs. Richardson said, opening a door at the end of a narrow hallway. Maria stepped inside and felt her heart sink a little. The room was tiny, barely large enough for the single bed, small dresser, and one window that looked out at the brick wall of the neighboring mansion. It was clean but cold, with white walls and no decorations. Still, it was free housing, and Maria reminded herself to be grateful. "You'll start tomorrow at 6 in the morning," Mrs. Richardson continued. "I'll leave a list of tasks on the kitchen counter each day. Dinner is at 7 sharp when Mr. Wellington is home. Any questions?" Maria shook her head. "No, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity." Mrs. Richardson's expression softened just a little. "You seem like a good girl, Maria. Work hard, stay out of trouble, and you'll do fine here." She paused at the door. "Oh, and Maria, Mr. Wellington doesn't like surprises. If anything unusual happens, you tell me immediately." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." After Mrs. Richardson left, Maria sat on the narrow bed and looked around her new home. It wasn't much, but it was better than sleeping on the streets. She unpacked her few belongings and placed her mother's photo on the small dresser. In the picture, her mother was smiling and holding a baby Carlos in her arms. "I'm going to make this work, Mama," Maria whispered to the photo. "I'm going to save enough money to help Carlos and maybe even go back to nursing school someday." That first night, Maria lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the sounds of the huge house settling around her. Pipes creaked, the heating system hummed, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint sound of classical music coming from downstairs. She wondered what Marcus Wellington was like in person. Would he be as cold and demanding as everyone said? Would he even notice her, or would she just be invisible like most domestic workers? Maria didn't know it yet, but Marcus Wellington was downstairs in his study, staring at financial reports but unable to concentrate. His mind kept wandering to thoughts he usually pushed away. Thoughts about how empty his enormous house felt, how silent his life had become, and how success had somehow made him feel more alone than ever. The next morning, Maria woke up before her alarm at 5:30. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, black pants, and a white polo shirt that Mrs. Richardson had given her, and made her way downstairs to the kitchen. The kitchen was like something from a cooking show, with marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, and enough space to feed an army. On the counter, just as promised, was a handwritten list from Mrs. Richardson. The tasks looked manageable: dust and vacuum the main living areas, clean the guest bathrooms, prepare fresh flowers for the dining room table, and have coffee ready by 7 for Mr. Wellington's breakfast. Maria worked steadily through the morning, moving quietly through the house. Everything was so clean and organized that she wondered if anyone actually lived here. The rooms felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but cold, expensive, but somehow empty. Around 8 o'clock, she heard footsteps on the main staircase. Her heart started beating faster as she realized she was about to meet her employer for the first time. Marcus Wellington walked into the kitchen wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and carrying a laptop bag. He was younger than Maria had expected and undeniably handsome, with dark hair, intelligent gray eyes, and the kind of confident presence that filled a room. But there was something distant about him, as if he was always thinking about something more important than whatever was happening in front of him. He glanced at Maria briefly, nodded once, and poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot she had prepared. "You must be the new housekeeper," he said without really looking at her. His voice was deep and professional, the kind of voice that was used to giving orders and having them followed. "Yes, sir. Maria Santos. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Wellington." Marcus nodded again and checked his watch. "I have meetings all morning. I'll be in my office. Please keep the noise to a minimum." He started to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Richardson mentioned you'll be living in the staff quarters. That's fine, but understand that I value my privacy. We probably won't interact much." "Of course, sir. I understand." And with that, Marcus Wellington walked out of the kitchen, leaving Maria standing alone with her coffee and her thoughts. Over the next several weeks, Maria settled into a routine. She woke early, cleaned the house, prepared simple meals, and tried to stay invisible. True to his word, Marcus rarely spoke to her beyond basic instructions. He was polite but distant, treating her more like a piece of furniture than a person. Maria learned his schedule quickly. He worked long hours in his home office, often taking conference calls that lasted for hours. He traveled frequently, sometimes for just a day, sometimes for weeks at a time. When he was home, he usually ate dinner alone in the formal dining room while reading business documents. The loneliness of the house began to affect Maria. She missed having conversations, missed laughing with friends, missed feeling like she mattered to someone. The work itself wasn't difficult, but the isolation was harder than she had expected. Still, she was grateful for the job. She was able to send money home to help with her father's medical bills, and she was slowly saving money for herself. Maybe in a year or two, she would have enough to go back to school and get her nursing license renewed. Everything changed on a cold December night, 3 months after Maria had started working at the Wellington estate. Maria had been feeling sick all day, dizzy, nauseous, and exhausted. She had tried to work through it, but by evening, she could barely stand up. When Mrs. Richardson noticed her struggling, she sent Maria upstairs to rest. "You look terrible," the older woman said with unusual kindness. "Go to bed early tonight. The house will survive one day without perfect cleaning." But Maria's condition got worse as the night went on. She developed a fever and started shivering uncontrollably. Around midnight, she realized she needed to go downstairs to get some medicine from the first aid kit in the kitchen. Wrapping herself in her thin blanket, Maria made her way carefully down the dark stairs. She was so dizzy that she had to hold onto the banister to keep from falling. The house was silent except for the sound of wind rattling the windows. In the kitchen, Maria found some fever-reducing medicine and took it with a glass of water. But as she started to head back upstairs, another wave of dizziness hit her so hard that she had to sit down on the floor to keep from fainting. The marble floor was cold against her fevered skin, and Maria found it actually felt good. She lay down for just a moment, thinking she would rest until the dizziness passed, and then go back to her room. But Maria was sicker than she realized. The fever had left her confused and disoriented. As she lay on the kitchen floor, wrapped in her blanket, she began to drift in and out of consciousness. In her fevered state, Maria began to dream about her childhood in El Salvador. She dreamed about her mother holding her when she was sick, singing lullabies in Spanish, and making everything better with love and warm soup. The dream was so vivid that Maria began to whisper the lullabies her mother used to sing, her voice weak but sweet in the silent kitchen. She curled up on the floor, clutching her blanket like a child clutching a stuffed animal. What Maria didn't know was that Marcus Wellington was downstairs in his study, working late as usual. He had been struggling to concentrate on an important merger proposal, his mind wandering to thoughts he usually kept buried. Around 2 in the morning, Marcus decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen before heading to bed. He walked quietly through the house, not wanting to wake anyone. But, as he approached the kitchen, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Someone was singing. The voice was soft and weak, singing in Spanish, but there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. Marcus stood in the doorway, unsure of what he was hearing. Then he saw her. Maria was lying on the marble floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, her face flushed with fever. She looked so small and vulnerable, like a lost child. The sight hit Marcus like a physical blow. For a moment, he just stood there, shocked by what he was seeing. Then his business instincts kicked in, and he approached carefully. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped Maria up from the cold floor. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, and he was struck by how fragile she felt. Her head fell against his shoulder as he carried her, and he could hear her labored breathing. "I'm taking you to the guest room downstairs," Marcus said softly. "You shouldn't be climbing stairs in your condition." Maria tried to protest. "Mr. Wellington, please. I can walk. I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not trouble," Marcus replied, and he meant it. "You're sick, and you need proper care." The guest bedroom on the first floor was decorated in soft blues and whites, with a comfortable queen-size bed and an attached bathroom. Marcus gently placed Maria on the bed and pulled the heavy comforter up to her chin. "I'm going to call Dr. Harrison," Marcus said, reaching for his phone. "He's my personal physician. He'll come right over." Maria's eyes widened with panic. "No, please, Mr. Wellington. I can't afford a doctor. I just need to rest." Marcus paused, his phone halfway to his ear. It had never occurred to him that someone might not call a doctor because of money. In his world, medical care was just another service you purchased when you needed it. "Don't worry about the cost," he said firmly. "I'm calling Dr. Harrison." Dr. Benjamin Harrison arrived within 30 minutes, carrying his medical bag and looking surprisingly alert for 3 in the morning. He was an older man with kind eyes and gentle hands who had been the Wellington family doctor for over 20 years. Marcus waited in the hallway while Dr. Harrison examined Maria. Through the partially open door, he could hear the doctor asking questions in a calm, professional voice. "How long have you had this fever, my dear?" "Since yesterday morning," Maria replied weakly. "But it got much worse tonight." "Any nausea? Vomiting?" "Yes, sir. And I feel very dizzy." Marcus found himself hanging on every word, worried in a way he hadn't felt in years. When had he stopped caring about other people's well-being? When had he become so focused on business that he forgot about basic human compassion? After what felt like hours, Dr. Harrison emerged from the room with his diagnosis. "She has a severe case of the flu, complicated by dehydration and exhaustion," the doctor explained. "Her fever is quite high, 103.2 degrees. She needs rest, fluids, and careful monitoring for the next few days." "Is she going to be okay?" Marcus asked, surprised by how anxious he sounded. Dr. Harrison smiled. "She'll be fine with proper care. But, Marcus, this young woman is severely overworked. When did she last have a day off?" Marcus realized he didn't know. Mrs. Richardson handles the staff scheduling." "Well, she needs complete bed rest for at least a week. No work, no stress. Just sleep, fluids, and nutrition." The doctor packed up his medical bag. "I'll leave some medication for the fever and nausea. Someone should check on her every few hours tonight." After Dr. Harrison left, Marcus stood outside the guest room door, unsure what to do. He had meetings scheduled for the next morning, conference calls with investors in Tokyo, and a presentation to review for the board of directors. But all he could think about was Maria lying in that bed, burning with fever and probably worrying about losing her job. Marcus made a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He canceled all his meetings for the next day. He spent the night in the chair beside Maria's bed, checking her temperature every hour and making sure she had water when she woke up. Somewhere around 5 in the morning, her fever broke, and she fell into a peaceful sleep. As the sun came up, Marcus found himself studying Maria's face in the soft morning light. She looked so young, even younger than her 28 years. There was something about her that reminded him of his sister Elena, who had died in a car accident when they were both teenagers. Mrs. Richardson arrived at 7:30 that morning and was shocked to find Marcus in the guest room. "Mr. Wellington, what are you doing here?" Is everything all right? Marcus explained what had happened, and Mrs. Richardson's face grew pale with worry. Oh my goodness, poor girl. I knew she looked tired yesterday, but I had no idea she was so sick. The older woman wrung her hands. I should have paid more attention. I should have sent her to rest earlier. It's not your fault, Marcus said. But I want to know, when was her last day off? Mrs. Richardson looked uncomfortable. Well, sir, she's been working every day since she started. She said she didn't need days off, that she was grateful for the work. Marcus felt a surge of guilt and anger at himself for being so oblivious to what was happening in his own home. From now on, she gets 2 days off every week, Marcus said firmly. And I want you to hire additional help so no one is working 16-hour days. Yes, sir. Of course. Over the next week, Marcus found himself taking personal responsibility for Maria's recovery. He brought her meals, checked her temperature, and even read to her when she was feeling well enough to listen. He discovered that she was much more intelligent and educated than he had assumed. She spoke 3 languages fluently, had been trained as a nurse, and had dreams of someday opening a medical clinic for immigrant families. Why didn't you tell me you were a nurse? Marcus asked one afternoon as he brought her a bowl of homemade soup. Maria looked embarrassed. You didn't ask, sir. And my nursing license expired. I couldn't afford to renew it after I lost my job. What happened to your job? For the first time since Maria had been working for him, Marcus actually listened to her story. She told him about the clinic closing, about losing her apartment, about her father's heart attack, and her brother's education. She spoke quietly but with dignity, never asking for pity or making excuses. Marcus was amazed by her resilience and strength. Here was a woman who had faced incredible hardships, but never gave up, never became bitter, never stopped caring about others. Why did you become a nurse? He asked. Maria's eyes lit up for the first time since he'd known her. My mother died when I was 15 because we couldn't afford proper medical care. I promised myself that I would help other families so they wouldn't have to go through what we did. As Marcus listened to Maria's story, something fundamental began to shift inside him. For years, he had measured success only in terms of money and power. He had built a fortune but lost touch with what really mattered. He had employees around the world, but no real friends. He had everything money could buy, but felt empty inside. Maria's simple act of sleeping on the cold floor rather than disturbing anyone, even when she was seriously ill, showed him a kind of selflessness he had forgotten existed. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after finding Maria on the kitchen floor, Marcus made another decision that would surprise everyone who knew him. He knocked on the guest room door, where Maria was sitting up in bed, finally, looking healthy again. Come in, she called. Marcus entered with an envelope in his hand and an expression that Maria couldn't read. Maria, I need to talk to you about your future here, he began. Maria's heart sank. She was sure he was going to fire her. Maybe he thought she was unreliable because she had gotten sick. Maybe he didn't want an employee who required medical attention. Mr. Wellington, please, she said quickly. I promise this won't happen again. I'll work harder. Marcus held up his hand to stop her. Maria, you're not in trouble. Actually, I want to offer you something different. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a check that made Maria's eyes widen in shock. It was for $50,000. I don't understand, Maria whispered, staring at the check. It's an advance on your salary, Marcus explained. I want you to use it to renew your nursing license, finish any education you need, and help your family with your father's medical bills. Maria looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Wellington, I can't accept this. It's too much. I haven't earned. You've earned more than you know, Marcus interrupted. But there's a condition. Maria waited, holding her breath. I want you to work as my personal assistant instead of as a housekeeper. You'll help me with research for my charitable foundation, assist with medical and educational programs, and help me remember how to be human again. Maria stared at him in amazement. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? Marcus sat down in the chair he had occupied during her illness. Maria, last week when I found you on that kitchen floor, it was the first time in years that I felt something other than ambition or anger. You were so sick that you could barely stand. But you still didn't want to bother anyone. You still worried more about inconveniencing others than about your own well-being. He paused, searching for the right words. I built this fortune by being ruthless, by caring only about winning. But you showed me what real strength looks like. You showed me what it means to put others first, even when you have nothing left to give." Maria wiped tears from her cheeks. "Mr. Wellington, I just did what anyone would do." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people in your situation would have demanded better treatment, better pay, better working conditions. But you just quietly did your job and tried to make everyone else's life easier, even when your own life was falling apart." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his perfectly manicured grounds. "I've been thinking a lot this week about what success really means. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I've never felt as poor as I did when I saw you lying on that floor. I realized that all my wealth means nothing if I use it only for myself." He turned back to face Maria. "I want to start a scholarship program for immigrants who want to pursue medical careers. I want to open free clinics in underserved communities. I want to do something that matters, something that would make my sister proud if she were still alive." Maria listened in amazement as Marcus shared his plans. This was a completely different man from the cold, distant employer she had known for months. "But why me?" she asked. "You could hire anyone to help you with those projects." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile Maria had ever seen from him. "Because you understand what it's like to struggle. You understand what these communities need because you've lived it yourself. And because you have something that all my money can't buy. You have integrity, compassion, and wisdom that comes from real experience." Maria looked down at the check in her hands, then back up at Marcus. "If I accept this, what happens to my position here? Where will I live?" "You'll live here, in the main house, not in the staff quarters. You'll have your own office, your own schedule, and the respect that you've always deserved but never received." For a long moment, Maria didn't speak. She thought about her mother, who had always taught her that good things could come from the most difficult situations. She thought about her brother Carlos, who could continue his education. She thought about her father, who could get the surgery he needed. But, mostly, she thought about the possibility of helping other families avoid the struggles that her own family had faced. "Mr. Wellington," she said finally, "I accept your offer. But I have one condition of my own." Marcus raised his eyebrows, curious. "I want to keep cleaning your house too, at least part-time. This work gave me dignity when I had nothing else. I don't want to forget where I came from." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. This young 3 months after Maria's dramatic transition from maid to personal assistant, the Wellington mansion had become an entirely different place. Where once there had been cold silence, now there was the sound of laughter, passionate discussions about social programs, and the constant hum of meaningful work. Maria had moved into a beautiful suite on the 2nd floor, complete with a sitting area that had been converted into her office. The walls were covered with maps showing locations of proposed medical clinics, charts tracking scholarship recipients, and photographs from community visits. But the most significant change wasn't in the house itself, it was in Marcus Wellington. The transformation in Marcus had been gradual, but remarkable. The cold, distant businessman who had barely acknowledged Maria's existence was now someone who asked about her family, remembered her favorite coffee, and spent hours discussing how to make their charitable programs more effective. Maria had kept her promise to continue some housekeeping duties, but now it was different. When she cleaned Marcus's office, they would talk about their latest project. When she prepared his meals, he would insist she join him for dinner so they could plan their next community visit. "Mrs. Richardson thinks you've lost your mind," Maria said one evening as they reviewed applications for their nursing scholarship program. They were sitting in Marcus's study, papers spread across the massive mahogany desk, sharing a pizza that Maria had ordered instead of preparing a formal dinner. Marcus laughed, a sound that had become much more common in recent months. "Mrs. Richardson thinks I've lost my mind because I'm actually happy for the first time in years. She's not used to seeing me smile." It was true. The household staff had noticed the change in their employer immediately. Marcus no longer barked orders or retreated to his office for days at a time. He asked about their families, gave them raises without being asked, and had even instituted a policy that all staff members receive paid vacation time and health insurance. "The employees think you've been replaced by a pod person," Maria teased, sorting through scholarship applications. James, your security chief, actually asked me if you were feeling okay last week. What did you tell him? I told him you were feeling better than okay. You were feeling alive. Marcus paused in his reading and looked at Maria across the desk. In the soft lamplight, with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing jeans and a Wellington Foundation t-shirt, she looked nothing like the desperate woman he had found on his kitchen floor 6 months ago. The Maria who sat across from him now was confident, passionate, and radiant with purpose. She had completed her nursing license renewal and was taking business courses online to better understand the Foundation's operations. Her father had had successful heart surgery, and her brother Carlos was thriving in his pre-med studies. But more than that, Maria had found her calling. She approached their charitable work with the same dedication she had once brought to nursing, treating each scholarship recipient and clinic patient as if they were family. I have something I want to show you, Marcus said, opening his laptop. The board approved our budget for next year. Maria leaned closer to look at the screen, and Marcus caught a hint of the lavender soap she always used. He had to force himself to concentrate on the numbers rather than how natural it felt to have her sitting so close. $25 million, Maria read aloud, her voice filled with awe. Marcus, do you realize how many families we can help with this? We can open 12 new clinics, fund 500 nursing scholarships, and expand our maternal health program to cover 3 additional states, Marcus said, unable to hide his pride in what they had accomplished together. Maria turned to look at him, her dark eyes bright with excitement. When I was a little girl, my mother used to tell me that God had a plan for everyone, but sometimes we had to go through difficult times before we could understand what that plan was. Do you think this was the plan all along? Marcus asked softly. I think. Maria paused, considering her words carefully. I think we were both lost in different ways. You had everything but felt empty. I had nothing but still had hope. Maybe we needed each other to find the right path. Their eyes met across the desk, and, for a moment, the air between them seemed charged with something more than professional collaboration. Marcus felt his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with business deals or foundation work. But before either of them could say anything more, Marcus's phone rang, breaking the spell. Mr. Wellington? This is Dr. Patricia Morales from Boston Children's Hospital. I'm calling about the Santos family. Maria's face went white at the mention of her family name. Marcus immediately put the call on speaker. Dr. Morales, this is Marcus Wellington. I have Maria Santos here with me. What's happening? Miss Santos, I'm afraid I have some difficult news about your brother Carlos. Maria gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles turning white. What's wrong? Is he okay? Carlos was in a serious car accident 3 hours ago in San Salvador. He's alive, but he's in critical condition with internal injuries and a severe head trauma. The local hospital is doing their best, but he needs specialized neurosurgery that isn't available there. Marcus watched as Maria's face crumpled with anguish. Without thinking, he moved around the desk and put his hand on her shoulder. What are his chances? Maria whispered. If he can be transferred to a facility with the proper equipment and specialists, his chances are good, Dr. Morales explained. But time is crucial. Every hour that passes reduces the likelihood of a full recovery. How do we get him transferred? Marcus asked immediately. The cost would be substantial, Dr. Morales warned. Medical transport from El Salvador, plus the surgery and hospital stay here in Boston, would run approximately $300,000. And the insurance situation is complicated for international transfers. Money is not an issue, Marcus said firmly, before Maria could even respond. What do we need to do to get Carlos here as quickly as possible? Maria looked at him with tears streaming down her face, speechless with gratitude. Dr. Morales sounded surprised, but pleased. If you're serious about covering the costs, I can have a medical transport team in El Salvador within 6 hours. Carlos could be an hour or by tomorrow afternoon. Do it, Marcus said without hesitation. I'll have my financial team wire the money within the hour. What information do you need? As Dr. Morales provided the necessary details, Marcus was already typing emails on his phone, setting the medical transport in motion. Maria sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by how quickly her world had changed from joy to terror to hope. After the call ended, Maria finally found her voice. Marcus, I can't let you do this. $300,000 is too much. I'll find another way. Marcus knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. Maria, 6 months ago you worked yourself to exhaustion and slept on a cold floor rather than ask for help. You've given me purpose, showed me how to use my wealth for something meaningful, and helped me become a better person. Helping your brother isn't charity. It's family taking care of family. Family, Maria whispered, looking into his gray eyes. Marcus realized what he had said, and, for a moment, he considered taking it back. But, looking at Maria's tear-stained face, he knew he meant every word. Yes, family. You're the most important person in my life, Maria. I would spend every penny I have to keep you from losing someone you love. Maria threw her arms around Marcus's neck, sobbing with relief and gratitude. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, and feeling more protective than he had ever felt about anything in his life. We're going to get Carlos here, Marcus whispered. He's going to be okay. The next 18 hours were the longest of Maria's life. Marcus's private jet was dispatched to El Salvador with a full medical team. Marcus himself coordinated every detail of the transfer, calling in favors from medical contacts around the world and ensuring that Carlos received the best possible care. Maria barely slept, pacing the mansion and checking her phone constantly for updates. Marcus stayed by her side the entire time, bringing her food she wouldn't eat and offering comfort however he could. Finally, at 3 in the afternoon, Dr. Morales called with an update. Carlos is here, and he's stable, she reported. The neurosurgeon says the next 24 hours are critical, but the preliminary scans look promising. The fact that he received immediate care during transport made all the difference. Maria collapsed into Marcus's arms with relief. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for saving my brother. We saved him, Marcus corrected. We're a team, remember? The next day, Marcus and Maria flew to Boston to be with Carlos during his recovery. The young man was unconscious but stable, surrounded by the most advanced medical equipment money could buy. Maria hadn't left Carlos's bedside in 12 hours when Marcus finally convinced her to step outside for some fresh air. He's going to be okay, Marcus said as they walked through the hospital garden. Dr. Morales said his latest scans show significant improvement. I know, Maria said, but her voice was still shaky with residual fear. I just keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. If I had still been working as a maid somewhere, with no resources, no connections. But I was there, Marcus said, stopping to face her. And I always will be. Maria looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that made her heart skip. Marcus. Maria, these past few months working with you have been the best of my life. You've changed everything for me. How I see the world, how I see myself, how I understand what's truly important. He took her hands, just as he had the night before, but this time his touch was gentle rather than comforting. I love you, Marcus said simply. I love your kindness, your strength, your dedication to helping others. I love how you make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. And I love that you still insist on making my coffee in the morning, even though you're running a multi-million-dollar foundation. Maria felt tears welling up again. But these were different tears, tears of joy rather than fear. I love you too, she whispered. I think I started falling in love with you the morning you carried me to the guest room and stayed by my bedside all night. No one had ever taken care of me like that before. Marcus cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, right there in the hospital garden. It was a kiss full of promise, full of hope for a future neither of them had imagined 6 months earlier. When they broke apart, Maria smiled through her tears. So what happens now? Now we save your brother, expand our foundation to help even more fam. 6 weeks after Carlos's successful surgery, he was well enough to travel back to El Salvador to complete his recovery. The young man had made a remarkable recovery, and the doctors credited the quick medical intervention for saving not just his life, but his cognitive function as well. Marcus and Maria had returned to their work with the Wellington Foundation, but their relationship had deepened into something beautiful and genuine. They were partners in every sense, in love, in work, and in their shared vision of making the world better. What they didn't know was that their story was about to become international news. It started with a seemingly innocent photograph. James Rivera, a photographer for the Boston Globe, had been at the hospital covering a different story when he happened to capture a candid shot of Marcus and Maria in the garden. The photo showed Marcus tenderly holding Maria's face as they shared their first kiss, with the hospital in the background. The photographer didn't think much of it at first, just a sweet moment between two people in love. But when he developed the photos later, he realized he recognized the man. It was Marcus Wellington, one of Boston's most eligible bachelors and one of the wealthiest men in America. Rivera did some research and discovered Maria's connection to the Wellington household. He learned about her previous job as a maid, about the foundation work they were doing together, and about Carlos's medical emergency. The photographer faced an ethical dilemma. The photo was clearly taken in a public space, making it legally publishable, but it captured such an intimate, private moment. After much consideration, he decided to approach the couple directly before publishing anything. Rivera called Marcus's office and requested a meeting. When Marcus learned what the photographer wanted to discuss, he agreed to meet with him, bringing Maria along. "Mr. Wellington, Ms. Santos," Rivera said as they sat in Marcus's office 2 days later. "I want to be upfront with you. I have a photograph that shows the two of you kissing in the hospital garden. I also know some of your story, how Ms. Santos worked as your housekeeper and is now running your foundation." Marcus felt his protective instincts flare immediately. "What do you want?" "I want to tell your story properly," Rivera said, surprising them both. "I've been a photographer for 20 years, and I've seen enough stories of wealthy men taking advantage of employees. But this isn't that story, is it?" Maria and Marcus exchanged glances. "No," Maria said quietly. "It's not that story at all." Rivera leaned forward. "I've been researching the Wellington Foundation's work. What you've accomplished in just 6 months is remarkable. The clinics, the scholarships, the community programs, you're changing lives." "That's Maria's work," Marcus said immediately. "She's the heart and soul of everything we do." "Which is exactly why this story matters," Rivera said. "In a world full of cynicism about wealth and power, you too represent something different. You represent the possibility that love can cross social boundaries, that wealth can be used for good, and that sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who end up changing everything." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He had always been fiercely private, avoiding media attention whenever possible. But Rivera was right. Their story could inspire others. "If we agree to this," Marcus said finally, "we control the narrative. We get to tell the story our way, and it focuses on the foundation's work, not just our personal relationship." "Absolutely," Rivera agreed. "I'm interested in the full story, how you met, how Ms. Santos transformed from employee to partner, how you're using your resources to make a difference. The romance is just one part of a much bigger picture." Maria had been quiet during the exchange, but now she spoke up. "I have a condition." Both men looked at her. "I want to make sure the story includes other people like me, immigrants, domestic workers, people who are struggling to make ends meet. If we're going to be in the spotlight, I want to use it to bring attention to issues that really matter." Rivera smiled. "I couldn't agree more." The article, titled "The Maid Who Changed a Billionaire's Heart," was published 3 weeks later on the front page of the Boston Globe's Sunday edition. Rivera had done exactly what he promised. He told their story with dignity, focusing on their work with the foundation while treating their romance with respect and sensitivity. The article included the hospital garden photograph, but it also featured images of Marcus and Maria visiting clinics, presenting scholarships, and working side by side on foundation projects. Rivera had interviewed scholarship recipients, clinic patients, and community leaders who spoke about the impact of their work. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the article's publication, Marcus's office was flooded with calls from other newspapers, television stations, and magazines requesting interviews. The Wellington Foundation's website crashed from the volume of traffic. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from heartfelt support to cynical criticism. "I can't believe this," Maria said, scrolling through Twitter comments on her laptop while sitting in Marcus's study. "Some people are calling this the most romantic story they've ever read. Others are saying you're just using me for publicity." Marcus looked up from his own computer, where he was reading emails from reporters. "Are you regretting this?" "No. Maria said without hesitation. Look at this email. She turned her laptop toward Marcus. The email was from a young woman in Chicago named Sandra Martinez. Dear Ms. Santos, Maria read aloud. I saw your story in the news today, and I wanted to thank you for giving people like me hope. I'm a single mother working as a hotel housekeeper while studying to become a teacher. Reading about how you went from cleaning houses to running a foundation makes me believe that anything is possible. You're proof that hard work and dignity matter, no matter what job you're doing. Thank you for not forgetting where you came from. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest as he listened. That's exactly why we did this. The emails and letters continued to pour in. Some were from wealthy individuals inspired to start their own charitable projects. Others were from working-class people who felt seen and validated by Maria's story. The foundation received donation offers from around the world, and hundreds of people inquired about volunteer opportunities. But not all the attention was positive. A gossip blog called Elite Secrets published a nasty piece suggesting that Maria was a gold digger who had seduced her wealthy employer. A conservative talk radio host spent an entire show ranting about inappropriate relationships between employers and domestic help. Several social media accounts spread false rumors about Maria's immigration status and her family's background. The negative coverage hit Maria harder than she expected. Maybe this was a mistake, she said one evening, sitting on the couch in Marcus's living room with her laptop closed and her head in her hands. Maybe we should have kept our story private. Marcus sat beside her and gently pulled her hands away from her face. Maria, look at me. When she met his eyes, he continued. Do you remember what you told me the night I found you on the kitchen floor? You said you became a nurse because your mother died from lack of medical care, and you wanted to help other families avoid that suffering. Maria nodded. That's exactly what we're doing now, just on a bigger scale. Yes, some people are going to be cruel and judgmental. That's what happens when you put yourself in the public eye. But for every person who criticizes us, there are 10 more who are inspired to help others. Marcus showed her his tablet, which displayed the foundation's donation tracking page. We've received over $2 million in donations since the article came out. That money will fund 60 more nursing scholarships and allow us to open 3 additional clinics. Really? Maria asked, her voice small but hopeful. Really? Your willingness to share our story is going to change thousands of lives, Maria. Don't let a few mean-spirited people overshadow that impact. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Mrs. Richardson appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. Mr. Wellington, there's a reporter from CNN at the door. She says she's here about the interview you agreed to do. Marcus and Maria exchanged confused looks. We didn't agree to any CNN interview, Marcus said. Mrs. Richardson wrung her hands. Well, she seems very confident that you did. She has cameras and everything. Marcus sighed and stood up. I'll go talk to her. But before he could leave the room, his phone rang. It was his publicist, Patricia Chun. Marcus, please tell me you're sitting down. Patricia said without preamble. Patricia, what's wrong? Your story has been picked up by international media. CNN, BBC, Good Morning America, they all want interviews. The Wellington Foundation is trending on every social media platform. And she paused dramatically. You've been invited to appear on 60 Minutes. Marcus felt dizzy. 60 Minutes? They want to do a full segment on your foundation's work and your relationship with Maria. It would be huge exposure for your charitable programs. Marcus looked at Maria, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. Patricia, let me call you back, Marcus said, ending the call. 60 Minutes, Maria repeated, her eyes wide. Marcus, that's terrifying, Marcus suggested. I was going to say amazing, but terrifying works too. They sat in silence for a moment, both overwhelmed by how quickly their quiet love story had become a global phenomenon. What do we do? Maria asked finally. Marcus took her hands, a gesture that had become natural and comforting for both of them. We remember why we're doing this, he said. We're not doing it for fame or attention. We're doing it because our story can help other people believe in possibility. We're doing it because the foundation's work matters. Maria nodded slowly. Okay, but I have conditions. Marcus laughed, a sound that never failed to make Maria smile. Of course you do. What are they? First, Any interviews we do have to include visits to our clinics and meetings with scholarship recipients. I want people to see the real impact of this work, not just focus on our romance. Agreed. What else? Second, I want to start a mentorship program for young women from immigrant families who want to pursue careers in healthcare or social work. If we're going to be role models, let's actually mentor people. Marcus felt that familiar surge of admiration for Maria's ability to turn any situation into an opportunity to help others. Done. What's the third condition? Maria smiled mischievously. I still get to clean the house sometimes, and you still have to help me. Deal, Marcus said, pulling her close for a kiss. But I think we're going to need to hire more security if we're going to be on 60 Minutes. As if on cue, the doorbell rang again, followed by Mrs. Richardson's voice calling from the foyer. Mr. Wellington, there are now 3 news vans outside. 6 months after their story became international news, Marcus and Maria had learned to navigate life in the public eye with grace and purpose. The 60 Minutes interview had aired to record viewership, leading to a documentary deal, a book offer, and invitations to speak at conferences around the world. But, more importantly, the Wellington Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams. The foundation now operated 42 medical clinics across 12 states, had awarded over 800 nursing scholarships, and had launched a mentorship program that connected successful professionals with young immigrants pursuing healthcare careers. Corporate donors had contributed over $50 million, and the foundation's model was being replicated by other philanthropists worldwide. Maria had completed her business degree and was now officially the foundation's executive director, while Marcus served as chairman of the board. They had hired a staff of 35 dedicated employees and established partnerships with medical schools, hospitals, and community organizations across the country. Their personal relationship had also flourished under the intense public scrutiny. Rather than driving them apart, the pressure had strengthened their bond and clarified their shared values. On a snowy December morning, exactly 1 year after Marcus had found Maria on his kitchen floor, he woke up with butterflies in his stomach and a ring hidden in his desk drawer. He had been planning this proposal for weeks, but wanted it to be perfect. Not perfect in the way his business deals were perfect, calculated and strategic, but perfect in the way Maria appreciated, simple, meaningful, and connected to their story. Maria was in the kitchen, as she was every morning, preparing coffee and reading through the day's foundation correspondence. She wore jeans and a Wellington Foundation sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in the messy bun that had become her trademark look. Marcus thought she had never looked more beautiful. Good morning, Marcus said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and kissing her neck. Good morning, Maria replied, leaning back against his chest. I just got the most amazing email from Dr. Hassan at the Detroit clinic. They delivered their first baby last night, a healthy little girl whose mother received prenatal care through our program. That's wonderful, Marcus said, but his mind was on the ring upstairs and the speech he had been practicing for days. Maria turned in his arms and studied his face. You're nervous about something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Marcus said quickly. Actually, everything is perfect. Can you meet me in my study after breakfast? There's something I want to show you. Maria raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Okay, but you're acting strange. An hour later, Maria knocked on the study door and entered to find Marcus standing by the fireplace, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. Marcus, what's going on? You look like you're about to give a presentation to hostile investors. Marcus laughed shakily. Actually, this is much scarier than any business presentation. He walked to his desk and picked up a framed photograph. The picture from the Boston Globe article showing their first kiss in the hospital garden. Maria, a year ago, you were sleeping on my kitchen floor because you were too sick to make it back to your room, but too considerate to ask for help. I was a man who had everything money could buy but had forgotten how to feel anything real. Maria felt her heart start to race as she began to understand what was happening. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger and more confident. You changed my life in ways I didn't even know were possible. You showed me what it means to use wealth responsibly. You taught me that success isn't about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you make possible for others. He set down the photograph and moved closer to her. You've made me a better man, a better philanthropist, and a better human being. You've given me a purpose beyond making money, and you've shown me what love really means." Marcus dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Maria gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. "Maria Santos, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. But what made Maria's eyes fill with tears wasn't the ring itself. It was the small inscription on the inside of the band that she could just make out. "From the kitchen floor to forever." "Yes," Maria whispered, then louder, "Yes. Of course yes." Marcus stood and slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. Then he pulled her close and kissed her with all the love and gratitude he felt for this extraordinary woman who had transformed his world. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love your strength, your compassion, your determination to help others. I love that you still insist on making my coffee every morning and that you cry every time we visit a new clinic. I love you too," Maria said, laughing through her tears. "I love that you remember my father's birthday, that you know the names of all our scholarship recipients, and that you still help me clean the house even though you're a billionaire." They held each other in the study, surrounded by photographs and documents that told the story of everything they had built together. "So," Marcus said finally, "how do you want to tell the world about our engagement? Press release? Social media announcement? Another magazine interview?" Maria was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she smiled with a mischievous look that Marcus had learned to both love and fear. "I have an idea," she said. "But you might think it's crazy." "Your crazy ideas are usually the best ones," Marcus said. "What are you thinking?" "I want to announce our engagement at the annual foundation gala next month. But instead of making it about us, I want to use it to announce something bigger." Marcus raised an eyebrows. "Bigger how?" Maria took his hands, her eyes bright with excitement. "I want to announce that we're donating $1 billion to create a permanent endowment for the foundation. Enough money to ensure that our clinics and scholarship programs will continue forever, even after we're gone." Marcus stared at her in amazement. $8 billion? It's your money, Marcus. I can't make that decision for you. But think about it. We could make this work sustainable for generations. We could guarantee that thousands of future students will get the education they need to serve their communities. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, doing mental calculations. $1 billion would represent about an eighth of his total wealth, but it would also represent something much more important, a legacy that would outlive both of them. "You know what?" he said finally. "Let's make it $2 billion. Maria's mouth fell open. $2 billion. $2 billion, Marcus confirmed. $1 billion for the domestic programs, $1 billion to expand internationally. We'll start with clinics in Central America and the Caribbean, then expand to other regions where healthcare access is limited." Maria threw her arms around his neck, overwhelmed with joy and pride. "Marcus Wellington, you magnificent, generous, wonderful man. Maria Santos soon-to-be Wellington, you brilliant, compassionate, life-changing woman," he replied, spinning her around the study. The foundation gala 6 weeks later was held at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel in Boston. 800 guests attended, including philanthropists, medical professionals, scholarship recipients, and community leaders from across the country. Carlos Santos, now fully recovered from his accident and enrolled in medical school at Harvard, served as one of the evening's speakers. He spoke eloquently about the foundation's impact on his family and his determination to become a neurosurgeon so he could help other families facing medical crises. Dr. Patricia Morales, who had coordinated Carlos's emergency treatment, announced the opening of 5 new trauma centers funded by the Wellington Foundation. Several scholarship recipients shared their stories of pursuing nursing and medical careers with the foundation's support. But the evening's biggest surprise came when Marcus and Maria took the stage together for the final presentation. "When I hired Maria as my housekeeper 18 months ago, I thought I was simply employing someone to clean my house," Marcus began, looking handsome in his black tuxedo as Maria stood beside him in an elegant navy blue gown. "I had no idea that I was inviting into my home someone who would completely change my understanding of what it means to be successful." Maria stepped forward. When I started working for Marcus, I was desperate for a job and grateful for a place to live. I never imagined that sleeping on a cold kitchen floor would lead to falling in love with an amazing man and building something beautiful together. Marcus took her hand, and the audience could see her engagement ring sparkling under the ballroom lights. "Tonight, we're thrilled to announce our engagement," Marcus said, causing the audience to erupt in applause and cheers. "But we also want to announce something else," Maria added when the applause died down. "Marcus has made the decision to donate $2 billion to create a permanent endowment for the Wellington Foundation." The ballroom fell silent for a moment as the magnitude of the announcement sank in. Then, the audience exploded into a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. "This endowment will ensure that our work continues forever," Marcus explained once the crowd settled down. "Future generations of students will receive scholarships, communities will have access to healthcare, and families will get the support they need to build better lives. This foundation started with one person showing kindness to another," Maria said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "It grew because we believe that everyone deserves dignity, opportunity, and hope. With this endowment, those values will continue to change lives long after Marcus and I are gone." As the gala ended and guests slowly made their way out of the ballroom, Marcus and Maria stood together watching the crowd. Scholarship recipients hugged their families, donors discussed new partnership opportunities, and medical professionals planned collaborative programs. "No regrets?" Marcus asked softly, squeezing Maria's hand. "About what?" "About any of it. The money, the publicity, giving up our privacy, committing to this work for the rest of our lives." Maria looked around the ballroom at all the people whose lives had been touched by their foundation. She thought about the clinics serving families who previously had no access to healthcare. She thought about the students who were pursuing careers in medicine because they had received scholarships. She thought about her own journey from desperate housekeeper to foundation executive to the future wife of a man who had chosen love and service over profit and isolation. "Marcus," she said, turning to face him with tears in her eyes, "sleeping on your kitchen floor was the best thing that ever happened to me." Marcus pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Finding you there was the best thing that ever happened to me." 5 months later, Marcus and Maria were married in a simple ceremony at a community clinic they had built in Maria's hometown in El Salvador. The wedding was attended by family, close friends, and many of the families who had been helped by their foundation's work. The local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "The maid who married a billionaire returns home as a champion for her people." But Maria knew that headline, while catchy, didn't tell the real story. The real story was that two people who had felt lost in different ways had found each other and discovered that the greatest wealth wasn't money in the bank, but love shared and service rendered. The real story was that a moment of human kindness, a billionaire helping a sick employee, had grown into a movement that would improve healthcare access for generations. The real story was that sometimes the most profound changes in life begin with the simplest acts of compassion. As Marcus and Maria danced at their wedding reception under strings of lights in a plaza surrounded by the clinic where local children now received free medical care, they knew their story was far from over. It was really just beginning. In the years that followed, their foundation would expand to 37 countries. Maria would earn a doctorate in public health and become an internationally recognized advocate for healthcare equity. Marcus would be appointed to serve on global health initiatives and would inspire dozens of other billionaires to commit significant portions of their wealth to charitable work. But, most importantly, they would build a marriage based on shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to using their blessings to bless others. The black maid who had once slept on a billionaire's floor had become a global humanitarian leader. The cold, isolated billionaire had become a man whose greatest joy came from service to others. And it all started with one act of unexpected kindness on one cold December night, when a man chose to see the humanity in someone the world had taught him to overlook. Their love story became legend, but their legacy was written in the lives they touched, the communities they served, and the hope they made possible for countless families around the world. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary moments. Sometimes a single night can change everything. Sometimes the floor is exactly where you need to be to find your way to the stars. Marcus and Maria looked at each other and started laughing. Ready for this? Marcus asked. With you? I'm ready for anything, Maria replied. Neither of them realized that the biggest surprise of their story was still to come. Elise and build a life together, Marcus said. If you'll have me. I'll have you, Maria laughed. But I have one condition. Marcus groaned playfully. Why do I feel like all the best decisions in my life come with conditions from you? I still want to clean the house sometimes. It reminds me that work has dignity, no matter what kind of work it is. Marcus pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Deal. But I get to help. As they walked back toward the hospital to check on Carlos, neither Marcus nor Maria could have imagined that their love story was about to become much more public than they ever intended. Woman, who had been offered a chance to completely change her circumstances, still wanted to honor the work that had brought her here. Deal, he said, extending his hand for her to shake. As Maria reached out to shake his hand, neither of them could have imagined how this moment would change not just their own lives, but the lives of thousands of people around the world. The story of the maid who slept on the floor was just beginning. Maria, he said softly, kneeling beside her. What's wrong? Are you sick? Maria's eyes opened slowly, and she looked up at him with confusion. Mr. Wellington? I'm sorry. I felt dizzy. Marcus could feel the heat radiating from her fevered skin. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand on her forehead. She was burning up. You have a high fever, he said, his voice gentler than Maria had ever heard it. How long have you been feeling sick? All day, Maria whispered. But I didn't want to bother anyone. I just needed some medicine. Marcus looked down at this young woman who had been working in his house for months, and for the first time, he really saw her. Not as an employee or a convenience, but as a human being who was suffering. The image of Maria lying on his cold kitchen floor, too sick to make it back to her room, would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. But in that moment, all he could think about was helping her.